Shonok glared at the hot sun as his weary warband marched through the desert wastes. Ahead in the Valley of Death, a cache of resources lay long forgotten, but Shonok's horde wasn't the only army aware of its existence. Even at this distance, Shonok could make out the foul contraptions of the Vermine Swarm. Hey, what's going on, Ninth Age? This is Obsidian Anubis, and I'm back with another Ninth Age battle report. This is Game 2 of a 3-battle, 1-day tournament I recently went to this past weekend out here in the Pacific Northwest. This time I got a game in against Vermine Swarm. So my previous game, if you haven't watched that, I suggest you go back and watch that one. But I was up against Saurian Ancient, and it ended up being an 8-12 loss. So I ended up going up against a Vermine Swarm player who I ended up playing back in the OFCC last July, who gave me a solid beating with an army similar to this. So I was looking for some payback when I came back into this battle. So let's go and do a quick look at my army. So on the far left, I have a group of 10 Orc boar boys with full command and additional hand weapons. I also have 2 Orc chariots there in the center. Next to them is my double D-Rock or my Gargantula with a web launcher. And then to the right and left, I have 2 units of 5 Goblin Raiders with throwing weapons. And then in the bottom right, I have Shonok's Horde, a block of 30 Feral Orc Edbashers with full command, additional hand weapons, and they have the banner of speed. Behind them are the Red Ardboys, which are 24 Iron Orcs with full command and the Ironhide icon. For characters, I ended up bringing 4 characters. I brought Wazhorn the Feral. He is just a level 1 shaman, or a shaman who knows 1 spell of shamanism, and he has the hero sword. Next to him is Saragoth the Totem Bearer, so BSB. He has the Mithril Mail and Wog Paint. And then I also brought Swinegate Boartusk, which is another shaman of shamanism who knows 3 spells, and he is the Scepter of Power. And then with him is my general, Sharnuk Swine Rider. He has the Glittering Cuirass, Lucky Charm, and the Axe of the Apocalypse, as well as having a shield and a war boar. So for my opponent, I just took a picture after he started moving, because I didn't get a picture before deployment. So this is what his army looks like. So over on the far right, he has a Dread Mill, which you can see he's already moved on his turn 1. Next to that is a block of 40 slaves. Next to that, in the middle, are 2 units of 36 Rat Arms. I think they both have full command. And then in the far left, he has another block of 40 slaves. And then outside of this picture on the far left is another Dread Mill. You can see behind the 40 slaves on the left is a Rat Swarm. And then in the back there's a catapult by the rock and a cannon. There's also a second Rat Swarm along with 15 Plague Brotherhood, which are hiding in that forest. That kind of small patch of desert is actually a forest. And then he has 9 Plague Disciples, which are behind the 40 block of slaves on the right. He had 4 characters. So in the left unit of 36 Rat Arms, he has a Magister, which is a level 4 of Shamanism, I believe, who has the Arcane Book and was his general. In that unit, he also has an Assassin. And in the right unit of 36 Rat Arms, he has a Tyrant with the Doom Blade, and then he has a Chief who is the BSB. He also has 2 of those small gun units. And then kind of in the middle of his forces, between the Plague Disciples and the right unit of 36 Rat Arms, there's a small icon that looks like 2 spears crossed. That is one of the secondary objectives. So for this objective, we were playing Secure the Target. So that is one. The other one is at the bottom left of this picture. You can see by the small wall, there's a kind of like a totem or a banner. That is the second Secure the Target. And then the special scenario for this game is Dark Shards. So as long as you have a scoring unit within one of those 2 Secure the Targets, you gain a Dark Shard. And a Dark Shard you can use once per turn and allows you to do a reroll on a failed to wound, to save, or to hit. You can only ever have 1 shard at a time. So basically, you can if you have one nearby, you can get 1 reroll every turn. So I ended up winning the roll off to go first, or to deploy first. So I deployed my entire army first with the intention of going second. And while you may say that's crazy, I wanted the second turn because, especially with the objectives of Secure the Target, I wanted the second turn so that way I would have the last turn to try to get a unit within one of the 2 secure the targets. So my opponent, Vermine Swarm, turn 1. So as I said, this is actually a picture of his first turn movement. So you can see he moved up his slaves. The Doomwheel on the right came up to just within the wall. Here's kind of a better picture of what the right looks like. In Magic Phase, he got Scarification off on his Shaman, but he got that through casting Break the Spirit on my Feral Orcs. So my Feral Orc Edbashers have the Break the Spirit on them, so if they declare a charge or anything, they are going to take dangerous terrain. You can also see through shooting, it looks like I've lost 3 or so of my Orcs. And in this unit, on the far left, you can see my level 3 Shaman, and then also my BSBs with this unit. And then in the Boar unit is my level 1 Shaman, or my Shaman who knows 1 spell, and my General. On the far left, the other Doomwheel moved up within just a few inches of my Spider Riders, which I brought up on the side. In shooting, he zapped, I think he zapped 2 or 3 of them, and then they failed the panic test and ran off the board. But other than that, not too bad for the first turn. So that brings us to Orcs and Goblins, turn 1. Alright, so this is what the how the battlefield looked before I declared charges. I didn't want to charge my Feral Orcs in because of the spell on them, Break the Spirit. So I decided to just charge my Boar Boys and the 1 Chariot into the Slaves. I knew he'd probably countercharge, but I wanted to just try to start breaking my way through and start getting rid of some of these slaves. I also declared a charge with my Spider onto the Doomwheel over here, which shot at the Spider's last turn. Unfortunately, I failed that charge. It was like an 11-inch charge, and I failed that. In Magic Phase, I got 10 Power Dice, which I managed to get Awaken the Beast, the toughness buff, on the Orc Boar Boys, so that gave them a little bit more protective ability. I didn't figure I needed the strength because they were strong compared to slaves anyway, so I didn't really need a strength buff. I think my opponent did manage to spell my other spells because I also, I think, tried to cast Break the Spirit or something similar to that. So in combat, you can see that this picture is actually taken after combat. I killed, I think, close to 15, 16, 17 maybe of his slaves, but he was obviously still steadfast, so he stuck around. So that brings us to Vermine Swarm, turn 2. Alright, so you can see he countercharged with the Dreadmill on the right into the Chariot, as well as the one group of 36 Rat-at-Arms with his Wizard and Assassin. He also moved up his slaves to start chaffing up my Feral Orcs and my Iron Orcs. I call this the Valley of Death because there's these 2 rock sculptures, these 2 impassable terrains with just this small gap in between, which is basically, well, everybody fights and everybody's gonna die. So, warning. Over here on the left flank, the Doomwheel ran towards my Spider, but didn't quite make it into combat. But in shooting, he did zap my Spider and I think do 7 wounds, so my Spider only has 1 wound remaining. In Magic Phase, my opponent got 3 Power Dice, and luckily I was able to dispel it, so he didn't get anything off this turn. In close combat, my Feral Orcs easily managed to wipe out the rest of the slaves. I killed a few of the Rat-at-Arms, but I threw most of my attacks forward. And again, because I had Awakened the Beast, the toughness buff, my opponent was really having a hard time wounding any of my Feral Orcs. It actually looks like I think I lost 2 Feral Orcs in combat. You can see my Chariot also took 1 wound, but I think my opponent rolled pretty bad for his impact hits with the Dreadmill, so I actually ended up winning this combat. The Dreadmill fled and the Chariot pursued because it was out of combat. The Rat-at-Arms held, being steadfast, so I just turned to face. So this is my Chariot overrunning the Dreadmill, and then my Orcs just turning to face. So I'll probably get countercharged next turn in the flank, but I'll have a turn in between, so maybe I can get something done in between that. So that brings us to Orcs and Goblins, turn 2. So over on the far left, I went ahead and charged into my Spider, hoping, we both are initiative 4, so I'm hoping at least maybe I can kill this Dreadmill before it kills me. And then I also charged my second Chariot into the flank of the Rat-at-Arms. This picture is actually taken after close combat, so kind of a prelude of what's going to happen. In Magic Phase, I managed to get 4 Power Dice, but unfortunately my opponent dispelled Awaken the Beast, which I was trying to get off on my Boar Boys again. And then in close combat over here, yeah, so I charged in with my Spider, my opponent zapped me, and killed my spider, but because we were at the same initiative, I went ahead and swung. I think I did 2 wounds with my normal 7 attacks, and then my Venomous Surge, it hit, it wounded, my opponent failed his armor save, and I had to roll a 3, and I did. And I ended up killing my opponent's Doom Dreadmill at the same time as it killed my spider. So this isn't an even trade. I would prefer my spider not to die, but at least it managed to kill the Doomwheel as it died. So it's the best I can hope for, I guess. So as I said in the previous picture, this is what it looks like after combat. So I don't remember if I lost. I think I actually won combat because I just killed so many rats, but they're just so many that it doesn't look like anybody changed. I also had a charge and a flank. So I think I won combat, but I did lose quite a few of my boars, as you can see. So that brings us to Vermine Swarm turn 3. Alright, so again, this is a picture of how the board looks like. I actually don't have a picture of my opponent's movement phase. So the Plague, those Plague Brotherhood, which are in the kind of top center of this board, charged into the flank of the Boar Boys. In Magic phase, my opponent got only 3 magic dice, but managed to get both Awaken the Beast off and Armlet of Power off. So the Awaken the Beast was on the Plague Brotherhood, and the Armlet of Power was off on the Assassin. So the Assassin is now quite deadly. And then this is what it looks like after combat. So I think my Chariot took a couple wounds, but yeah, the Assassin I think killed my General before I even had a chance to swing with him. The Plague Brotherhood wiped out the remaining 2 boars and easily crushed them. I definitely lost this combat, so my Chariot fled. My opponent pursued with the 36 Ratted Arms. The Plague Brotherhood, they didn't have anybody in combat, but because they were frenzied, they had to overrun. But they didn't really overrun into anything in particular. But the Ratted Arms managed to chase down and catch my boars, or excuse me, catch my Chariot and run into my Iron Orcs. So that brings us to Orcs and Goblin turn 3. Alright, so in my turn, I charged the Feral Orcs into the unit of Slaves. And other than that, I don't do too much. I pivot my other Chariot, which is still alive, which is outside of this picture, so it can face and possibly charge either his cannon or possibly the flank of his other second unit of Ratted Arms. In Magic phase, I get 6 power dice and manage to get Savage Fury off on my Iron Orcs, as well as Awaken the Beast toughness buff on my Iron Orcs. So this picture is actually taken after combat. I lost, I think, I'm missing a whole back row, which would be 6 Iron Orcs. I think a couple of those were killed earlier from shooting, so I think I lost about 3 or 4 from close combat. But you can see that the Ratted Arms are greatly diminished. I think I killed like 20 or 22. So my opponent was no longer steadfast and easily broke. I gave chase and caught them, so that got rid of my opponent's Assassin, Wizard, who was also the General. Unfortunately, it left me in the forest, so I will have no ranks for when my opponent countercharges. And then in the combat with the Feral Orcs versus the Slaves, I killed a whole bunch of Slaves. My opponent, I probably killed a few of my Feral Orcs, but again, my opponent was steadfast, so nothing happened. So that brings us to Vermine Swarm turn 4. So as I predicted, my opponent countercharged with the second unit of Ratted Arms and the Plague Brotherhood into my Iron Orcs. You notice that my Chariot is missing from this picture. Yeah, it was shot to pieces, I think, on the previous turn by my opponent. You can also see that I ranked up my Feral Orcs at the end of last turn to give myself more ranks. Close combat, even though I had Awaken the Beast and Savage Fury off on my Iron Orcs, my opponent was striking at initiative 4, and those Plague Brotherhood are nasty. They ran in and they automatically did impact hits because of the Plague Brotherhood. They did toxic attacks, and then with the flails, they were just cutting through my armor left and right. So it was rough. The few remaining Iron Orcs I had left, I threw most of them at the Plague Brotherhood, and I killed 6 of the 9. The other 2, I think, who were too far away, so I had to strike the main unit. My opponent moved his tyrant with the Doomblade into combat, so I was like, "So what type of armor does he have?" And my opponent kind of stares at me and shifts his eyes and he's like, "None." I'm like, "Okay, my 2 Iron Orcs will swing at the tyrant." So I attacked with his 2 Iron Orcs at his tyrant and I managed to kill him. So although my Iron Orcs were completely wiped out, they did manage to kill the tyrant and do significant damage to the Plague Brotherhood. So this is what the battlefield looks like after my Iron Orcs broke and the 3 Plague Brotherhood chased them down. You can see in the combat with the slaves, again, I peeled off a couple ranks, but nothing really happened. So that brings us to Orcs and Goblins, turn 4. Oh, sorry, I apologize. So in the battle with the slaves, I actually killed the slaves and then overran into the rat swarm. So this is actually my movement phase, is me running into his rat swarms. And my 2 spiders, you can see, charge the 1 weapons team up there on the left. In Magic phase, I managed to get 4 power dice, which I don't think got me anything. I think my opponent managed to spell Awaken the Beast, which was the only spell he was really trying to get off. In close combat, my spiders easily, well, shouldn't say easily, but my spiders managed to kill the weapons team and overrun into the flank of the Rat-at-Arms. My Feral Orcs made quick work of the giant rats and ran into the front of the Rat-at-Arms. However, combat had already been fought in this turn, so it'll be my opponent's turn before we actually can do this fight. So this brings us to Vermine Swarm and Orcs and Goblins turn 5. At this point, I only took 1 picture, so I'll have to describe as best I can. So this is what the picture looks like during my opponent's turn before we actually fought. So you can see he moved his other rat swarm to kind of chaff up my Feral Orcs. He also turned to face his Plague Brothers towards the rear of my Feral Orcs. In close combat, I killed quite a few of his rats, but I think we stayed there 1 whole turn. So on my turn 5, we continued fighting, and then he actually broke from combat on my turn, and being feral, I had to pursue. My Feral Orcs pursued into the rat swarm. My spiders chased, but didn't get anywhere, or didn't catch him, I should say. So that brings us to Vermine Swarm turn 6. So here's a picture of my Feral Orcs running into the swarm. My opponent decided he did not want to charge the Plague Brothers into the rear of my Feral Orcs. He thought that would be a bad decision, which is probably correct. And he did manage to pass his frenzy test, so they actually didn't charge in. In shooting, my opponent killed those last 2 spiders and managed to rally the remaining Rat-at-Arms with his BSB. And then in close combat, my Feral Orcs killed the rat swarms, and my opponent was hoping I would roll, I think, average. I think if I rolled 7 inches, I would have been out. I wouldn't have been able to see the Rat-at-Arms. They would be outside my forward arc. However, after killing them, I rolled like 4 for my overrun. So I overran just a few inches, so that still left the Rat-at-Arms in my front arc. So being an Orc and Orcs and Goblins turn 6, I had to charge. So I'm pretty bloodthirsty. So not to mention, you can see the secondary objective in this picture. I have, at this point, been nowhere near any of the secondary objectives, so I didn't have any of the rerolls to get. My opponent had that 1 unit of rats next to the secure the target the entire game, so he'd been having 1 reroll every turn. So he was actually getting all those bonuses, and I was more or less not getting anything. But at this point, my Ferals managed to charge into the Rat-at-Arms, which brought me within 6 inches of the secondary objective. In Magic phase, I rolled 5, which was just enough to get off Awaken the Beast off on my Feral Orcs. Again, I think I went toughness because I didn't need the extra strength. My Feral Orcs broke the the Vermin Swarm Rat-at-Arms. Again, I had to pursue, and again I rolled like 2. My Feral Orcs were obviously very tired at this point because they were not running very fast. So my opponent's unit did get away. They are fleeing, so I will get half points for them at least, but they are still on the board. However, because I failed at pursuing, it meant that I was still within 6 inches of the secondary objective. So the secondary objective that my opponent had been securing the entire game. On the last turn, my Feral Orcs managed to run close enough to make it so that nobody got the secondary objectives. So my plan of placing my entire army first, going second, actually paid off. When my Feral Orcs managed to, on that last turn, get within 6 inches of the token to make it so that nobody got the secondary objective. Because of that, it ended up being an 11-9 victory in my favor. So if my Feral Orcs had not moved within 6 inches, it would have been, an 8-11 loss. But because my Feral Orcs managed to overrun not far enough, they managed to get the secondary objective or steal it away from my opponent. So it ended up being an 11-9 just based on points alone. So this was the second battle of the one-day tournament that I attended. So this bounced me. So after the first game, which was a minor loss, this one was now kind of a minor win. It kind of put me in the middle of the pack, moving on to game 3, of which I was going to be paired with another Orc and Goblin player. So I figured it was statistically likely I would be fighting another Orc and Goblin player. 3 of us brought Orcs, and 3 people brought Saurian Ancients. So it was statistically likely that I would play one of those 2 armies again. And since I played Saurian Ancients my first game, I got to play Orcs and Goblins on this third game. But other than that, if you guys saw any mistakes or comments, please put those in the comment section below. This was a really fun game. I really enjoyed this rematch against the Skaven, or Vermine Swarm, excuse me. Like I said, I played this player and a similar army list at the OFCC last July, and I just got massacred. So this was a really nice kind of trade back victory where I managed to pull out a minor win against this opponent because he's a really good opponent. He really knows his strategy. So it felt really good to kind of get back and fight some Skaven, Vermine Swarm, and not do so poorly this time. The only comment I have about this is I dislike this table. Actually, on game 3, the TO was like, okay, you're going to be on this table. I'm like, oh man, I was just on that table. And I think he was kind enough that he let me swap to a different table. So I was very pleased with that because this table itself wasn't bad. And I am Desert Orcs, and it is a desert-themed list or table. So it suits it, but I really dislike those 2 pieces of impassable terrain there in the center. It really makes this Valley of Death where basically everybody's going to die in, which is, well, basically everybody died. But it was a really fun game. If you guys saw anything, please put those in the comment section below. If you have any questions, same. And as always, hit like and subscribe. And as always, game on.